agreement for 3518 Hillside Avenue and to provide background information on the Linley Valley Parkland Acquisition Program. And we have one delegation, Mr. Jim Taylor. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. 9:58:57.
You have up to 10 minutes.
Reminds me of my drag racing days.
Well, it sort of is, isn't it?
The first notice I saw about this acquisition was referring to a $9 million purchase. I see we've got it down to 7.9, so kudos to whoever's doing the hard bargaining. But everyone likes and supports parks. They're right up there with motherhood and apple pie. Nanaimo currently has 2,000 acres to our credit. The question whether we can afford this acquisition, that's the question at this time without going into long-term borrowing for this particular project. A question that's worth asking is why this desirable land was ever zoned for development in the first place. But that's not the issue at hand. The issue before us is the method for paying for this decision. The way this project is going to be financed, according to my understanding, is that we're going to we don't need to borrow funds because we're going to use a whole bunch of reserve accounts at the city. Those funds are going to come from a property sales fund, parkland dedication fund, DCC-wide parks fund, property acquisition reserves, property acquisition for 2014 budget. It's noticeable that that $600,000 is money that we haven't collected yet. We're already spending it. And we're going to take $1.1 million out of the general capital fund. The other $1.5 million comes from a whole bunch of other cookie jars or different reserve accounts, and those include storm capital, fire department, public education, Nanaimo Athletic Commission, Beban area property, engineering capital, recreation, transportation, economic development, police capital, DSD, incomplete projects, emergency services, local improvements, North Slope stability, arena capital, and legislative services. So with the exception of the general capital reserve, which will have $1.3 million left in that pot, the DCC citywide parks will have $14,000 left in it. All those other accounts will have a zero balance left in those accounts once that money is taken out to pay for this acquisition. It would seem that this council, you're not content with just using all the cookies that are in the jar. You're not even going to leave any crumbs left in these cookie jars from now on. Many of these reserves have been built up over the years by the city overtaxing Nanaimo taxpayers, such as the $4 million in surplus that was collected in 2013 and $2.5 million that was collected in surplus in 2012. If the argument for putting this overtaxation in different reserve accounts is having money available for a dedicated purpose, and then those accounts can be rated at the whim of council, then all that overtaxation should just go into one big slush fund so that we can use it whatever we want. The fact that the funds can be taken from dedicated reserve accounts at the whim of council begs a question as to whether there ever was a legitimate reason for keeping those surplus taxes in the first place. From the community charter, section 189 says, and this is referring to the use of reserve funds, subject to this section, section 189, money in a reserve fund and interest earned on it must be used only for the purpose for which the fund was established. What would be preferable is to quit raising taxes year after year when it is not necessary based on the surpluses that we're experiencing. Obviously, we're collecting more taxes than what we really need to spend, so we keep putting it away in these slush accounts. There was no need for a tax increase this year or next if last year's surpluses had been used this year. Clearly, we do not have the funds for this parkland purchase, and the only way it should be funded is by long-term borrowing, which is consistent with the policy that a major project which has long-term benefit should be supported with long-term financing so that future users may also share in paying for the project that they are benefiting from. The fact that this multi-million-dollar purchase has to be cobbled together in such a fashion is witness to the result of questionable spending by this and previous councils. We are finally seeing the results of spending tax dollars like there is simply no tomorrow. A few examples: the $75 million building we're sitting in, $15 to $20 million shiny new office, my favorite one, $10 million for a few feet of roadway up at Quarterway, $1 million for some pretty new pictures in the pool areas. I don't know how many millions of dollars it's going to cost us to maintain our own local 911 service. We got $200,000 on an end wall of a $300,000 building. We're going to have to spend $6 or $7 million on a trestle down at Wilcox that leads to property that we don't own. And those are just a few examples of some questionable spending that's leading to our now having to raid all these different cookie jars to come up with $8 million to buy property with an assessed value of $2.5 million. This council should borrow the funding and allow future beneficiaries to contribute to the purchase. The only reason for not borrowing this $8 million or whatever it is if this council doesn't want Nanaimo taxpayers to have a say whether they think we can afford this purchase at this time or not. I would hate to think that that is just a vote-buying exercise, given that this is an election year. One thing is very clear, however, and that is that this council has never seen a tax dollar that you're not willing to spend. When the city finance director prepares the report on the current funds that are in reserve accounts, I hope he's instructed to also bring a report that shows how many funds were in these reserve accounts in 2008 and 2011. It could make for some interesting comparisons. Now, if this cookie jar is so empty that this is what we have to do to come up with $7 or $8 million, I will wonder what we're going to do with some of these next looming expenses we've got. Colliery Dam's going to be millions, doesn't matter what we're going to do with it down there. Nanaimo Recycling Exchange, I understand, is looking for $2.5 to $3 million. Victoria Road Theatre, if we keep it, we're going to spend another $700,000 on that one. Wilcox Property Trestle is $6 to $7 million at the very least. Who knows what kind of money we could get into if we have to start shoring up or filling in all these dangerous mine shafts we discover all around town. And then we've got the big one down the road, which is $100 million or whatever for some new dam for our new water supply. And is there really adequate funding right now for any major incidents that might happen with our aging infrastructure? I have to wonder when we're scrambling around like this to come up with $7 or $8 million. So what level of taxation is affordable or sustainable? Does anyone know? Or are we just going to keep emptying all the cookie jars, secure in the fact that the local taxpayer can afford never-ending tax increases? Borrowing and allowing future beneficiaries to participate in paying for this project is the proper thing to do. Just one closing thought, and this speaks more to the process that has brought us to this decision so far. This was an interesting little paragraph that came out of Eli Mina's report, and he was talking about how business is conducted in this chamber. And what he was talking about then was the number of people that can actually address council before a decision is made. And the observation that he was making, and he's talking about restricting that, he says, but if a small group of super engaged individuals were allowed airtime on every issue, those few, and I dare say just a dozen, could end up having much greater influence over the decision-making process than the more than 99% of the population who are affected by council's decisions and never attend these meetings. Clearly this math is his words, clearly this math is problematic and does not exactly advance the principles of fairness, equality, and common sense. And I wonder if that isn't the principle that has brought us here today. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no questions. Thank you, sir. Now,